I snooze, my wife yells at me because I snooze. Only for an hour. Only for an hour. The snoozing will be done after that. I have a question for you, but it's not a question that I want you to answer out loud. I want you to think about this. The question is this: who are you? You might, if I ask you that question, you might say, I'm so-and-so, and say your name. But that's not really what I'm asking. I'm not asking what your name is, but who are you? You might be tempted to say, well, I'm an artist, or I'm an athlete, I'm a dancer, whatever it may be. But that's what you do, not who you are. And today I want to talk about a little bit more who you are. And you may even be sitting here saying, I'm lost. I don't know who I am. And that's all right, because I've got all the answers to life's questions. I don't. But hopefully I can get you thinking a little bit more, looking at a guy named Moses' life. All right. Now, we're gonna call him today, we're going to call him Woke Moses. All right? Woke Moses. And, what was that? I did something cool and somebody chuckled. What was that laugh for? So I'll try it again. Yeah, Woke Moses. Moses, if you guys don't remember, I'm just going to catch you guys up. Moses was a Hebrew. He was born into slavery. And a horrible thing happened, this genocide. Pharaoh looked out and saw the Israel population, the Hebrew population was growing and felt threatened. How many of you have ever seen A Bug's Life? All right, it's a great movie. Okay, good. We've all seen it, and you know what? Most underrated Pixar movie, I'll tell you that much right now. Nobody ever talks about A Bug's Life. Great movie. But in that movie, what happens is the grasshoppers see that the ants are growing. There's too many of them, so they enslave them, right? They kind of make them do their will. And Pharaoh is the same kind of situation. So he enslaves them, and what he does is he kills all their baby boys that are being born. Moses is spared. He is put into a basket. He flows down the river. If you've ever seen The Prince of Egypt, in your mind you're like, oh yeah, that part where the alligator almost eats him and the fisherman almost... Yeah, no, I think it's just kind of like, I think it was very anticlimactic. Just like barely went down the river a few feet. And Pharaoh's daughter takes him and raises little Moses as her own. So here we have a Hebrew now living in the house of Pharaoh. And in the movie The Prince of Egypt, they say that he's the son of Pharaoh, but really he is the son of Pharaoh's daughter. So there's a little bit of a lineage, to get to that top seat in the kingdom, which in the movie it makes it seem like he's just like one person removed or something from being the top. But in this, we're going to see how Moses kind of becomes woke. We're going to see how that happens here. Now, before that, I'm going to ask you if you've ever heard this phrase before: ignorance is bliss. Can you just tell me, in your own words, what does it mean, ignorance is bliss? Yeah.
You stay happy if you're ignorant to something.
Yeah, you stay happy if you don't know the truth, right? What are some examples of maybe ignorance is bliss? Like what are some things that maybe you wish you didn't know and you would have been happier? You don't have to get real personal. It could just be like, maybe there's injustice in this world, right? Like you'd rather not know. There was a movie called Hotel Rwanda back in the 2000s, I forget. Joaquin Phoenix was in it. I'm just going to throw out his name since it's a popular name right now. He had a tiny little role. But you might say, oh wow, I want to see Joaquin Phoenix. Where is he? He shows up for a little moment. But in that movie, Joaquin Phoenix is he's in the media. He's American in Rwanda. He's covering this civil war that's happening. And one of the Rwandans says, you have to tell the story. You have to take this back to America, and you need to tell the people about that people are dying here, and we need help. And he says, you know what? People will see this on the news and say, wow, that's really horrible. And then go back to eating their dinners. Because we as people, we almost, ignorance is bliss. We just want to live our lives like, I point out like a dog, right? You ever see a dog, how happy a dog is? Are you ever jealous of how happy a dog is? A dog needs very little to be happy. Just a home and food and pet him or her. You know, just so, and they're like always smiling with their tongue hanging out. It's just no worries. They got no bills, nothing. They're just living it up. So, ignorance is bliss, or is it though? We're going to talk about Moses here. And I want us to kind of just look at this passage, and if we can together, kind of learn a little bit about who Moses was, some of his intentions, some of his heart. I think it'll be somewhat insightful, and I want us to really talk about then what it means in our own lives. Exodus 2 says this in verse 11, one day when Moses had grown up, he went out to his people, and he looked down their burdens and saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his people. What do we learn about Moses here? Let me read it again. One day when Moses had grown up, he went out to his people and he looked down their burdens. And he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his people.
He grew up in Egypt.
He grew up in Egypt, yes. So Egypt was his home. I'm also going to point out he grew up. So this is not Moses as a little boy. And it's interesting that he walks out and he looked down he went out to his people and he looked down their burdens, and he's an adult now. It begs the question, did he see these burdens before? Is it hitting him differently? Is he paying attention to it in the different ways that affecting him? We can see that he has compassion, right? I'm going to ask you this again in a minute. But I'll say this, Moses that the Hebrew people were his people. I said this in the first, when I was talking to the younger kids. But if you watch The Prince of Egypt, you almost get a different story. Have you ever seen Prince of Egypt? Oh my goodness. Yeah. We should just stop the lesson now and watch it. It is great. Greatness, right? Yeah. Okay. Are you just saying that because I asked?
No, it's a really good one.
Okay. Okay. It is great. The music is great. The animation is great. It's a great flick. It's solid. Singable. That's how it works. But anyway, I digress. The only thing about it is, I walk away from that movie saying, wait a second, was that in The Prince of Egypt or was that in the Bible? Because they start to change some of the things up. So I'm admitting I love the movie, but it's not factual, all of it. Because in the movie, Moses thinks that he's an Egyptian until he's an adult, and he finds out later, like, what? That's why I look different? That's why I look like all the Hebrews? I just thought, I don't know. But in the Bible, we realize, oh no, he knew that he was a Hebrew. He went out and he looked at their circumstances. So, what is the consequence to knowing the truth? So he went out there and he saw what was actually happening. Well, Jesus in John 8:31 and 32 says, the Bible says this. So Jesus said to the Jews who had believed in him, if you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth. And the truth will set you free. One result of knowing the truth is that there's a burden lifted. No longer are you living a lie. Let me ask you a question. Would you rather be living out a lie or know the truth?
Know the truth.
Know the truth? You can be honest.
Know the truth.
Know the truth? Okay. Okay. What if the truth hurts? Worse yet, what if the truth means I got to do something about this now that I know?
Depends on the situation.
What's that?
Depends on the situation.
It does depend on the situation. And this is the hard part about the truth. Jesus says the truth will set you free. But we know that the truth can also be a burden. Because once we know the truth, and if we do not act on the truth, it can begin to eat at us. Right? It can begin to, I don't know if you've ever done something wrong. I don't know if you've ever felt guilty about something to the point where you're in bed and you're having a hard time going to sleep because your heart is racing going, oh my goodness, I did something wrong. I need to do something about this to fix it, because you know in your heart, this you can't go on without until this thing is resolved. That's how the truth is. So the truth, it will not let us rest until we take care of it. Well, the truth can be a burden, as we just pointed out, and for Moses, this was not a situation where he was like, oh look, an Egyptian is beating one of my people. But that's none of my business. He didn't just walk away and say, you know what, I got it good. If I don't mess with this, I can just go right back to the palace and just live my life. But the real question is, what would you do in Moses' situation if you saw this injustice? Let's say you grew up in a foreign let's say, I don't know, that's not a really good example, but let's just say you saw something unjust happening. Some injustice. Like this. Let's just say you were in Moses' shoes, in his sandals. What would you do? What would you do? Literally, as you're reading it, what do you think you would do? Yeah?
So I would try my best to stop it. It might not work.
Okay. So you intervene, get in between them or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd also intervene, but it's kind of it's like a perspective, like you were saying, if we see it on the news and we're not physically present, it's not a lot we can do either. So it's kind of it makes you think it's not never mind, that's not
No,
that makes sense.
but yeah, it's I'd intervene there, then and there if I was physically present, but if not, it's what can I do?
yeah, honestly, that's a really great point, that sometimes we learn things and we feel powerless. I don't know what to do in this situation. So I'm glad that you actually brought that up. That's something I think for a bigger conversation, because there are times where we don't know what to do. And sometimes all that we can do is pray, Lord, what do you want me to do with this information? Now that I know, we hear big things like sex trafficking, for instance. This is one that weighs on me, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is a horrible, horrible thing. I can't even believe it exists in this world. And yet I'm like, how am I supposed to fix this? I work at Moody Bible Institute. We have a major designed for people who want to help victims of sexual exploitation. But even then, it's what can they do? Because it takes, you need to be well versed in the law, and there's so many things. So there are little things that we can do if we start digging hard enough, but I do understand, at times we just feel completely powerless. In this situation, you might intervene. Well, Moses did intervene. He intervened in a way that I don't think I would have intervened, because let's just face it, I don't know. I don't know what I was going to say with that, so we'll forget that thought. But it says that he looked this way and he looked that way. I don't know if he was in the dark alleys of a couple of pyramids, and seeing no one, he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. And I just wish I didn't have this gruesome imagination of just him hacking away at this Egyptian, and it's just a nasty scene, where do I rub the red off my hand? But anyway, he kills this Egyptian, and that's how he handles it. The truth drove him to an action, and in this case, I don't believe it was the right action. But there was something in him. Maybe he's been holding this in for so long that it came out in a very unhealthy way. I'm not really sure. All I know is you can see from this is a passionate reaction, that the truth was weighing on him so heavily. When he went out the next day, behold, two Hebrews were struggling together. And he said to the man in the wrong, "Why do you strike your companion?" Now, he just killed this Egyptian. How do you think he feels? He killed this Egyptian because the Egyptian was abusing this Hebrew. Now he sees two Hebrews fighting each other, abusing each other. How do you think he feels in this situation? How would you feel in this situation? Let me ask you a question. The fact that he looked this way and that and made sure no one was looking implies what right before he killed the Egyptian? That he was scared, right? He didn't want to get caught. In other words, there was risk because he felt like he could get in trouble for what he did. In serious trouble. So he risked a lot to save that Hebrew, and now he's saying, oh my goodness, these guys are fighting with each other. Now I believe he had a very small view of justice, that's why. Justice was not killing the one Egyptian. Justice is freeing the people. And God put that on his heart. Like, these people need justice. But he went about it really the wrong way. I don't fault him too much because he didn't have that relationship with God at this point. But you can see God is already planting the seed in his heart. And putting the truth in his heart. He answered, or the guys answered, "Who made you prince and a judge over us? Do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" Then Moses was afraid and thought, surely this thing is known. Oh my goodness, the word has gotten out. People know what I did. The secret is out. They're like, who died and made you judge? Judge Dredd and Aaron Judge? No. Told you it wasn't going to work, Michelle. She made that slide for me. She also wanted to call the lesson Womo, and I said, no. None of that was true. So, when Pharaoh heard of it, he sought to kill Moses. What does this tell you about Pharaoh and Moses' relationship?
They had beef.
Yeah.
They don't like each other.
Mm-hmm. What does it also tell you about Moses? How Moses is viewed? He's not liked. He's not accepted. When the guy said, "Who made you prince and judge over us?" Think about this. Prince, he's in the house of royalty. The Hebrews are like, we didn't put you in there. You grew up with this privilege and you never cared about us before. Why do you care all of a sudden? Who made you judge over us? They don't realize that one day Moses will be leading the people of Israel. He literally will be their judge. He'll be their leader. But right now, they don't know that and they don't see that. Worse, so his own people rejected him. But not only that, now Pharaoh is like, you're no son of mine. And he sought to kill him for killing a taskmaster. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and stayed in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Our actions have consequences. And that's not always a bad thing. Sometimes our actions have good consequences. Maybe we speak out and other people start to speak out. You think about the actions of like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., for instance. Those actions are great. That spark change in this country. So actions have consequences isn't always a bad thing. But we do have to understand that our actions will always have consequences. There's always something's going to happen. So that's why it's so important to always recognize how you're living, what you're doing, to know this is going to have either good or bad consequence. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs. To water their father's flock. So the priest of Midian, all right, his daughters come to fill the troughs, but shepherds would come and drive them away. But Moses stood up and saved them and watered the flock. What did we learn about Moses again here?
He sees injustice. Well, he's not really injustice.
Yeah, he does. He sees injustice. They're being mistreated, and he feels the need again to intervene. So he slaughtered all of the shepherds and threw them down the well. No, he didn't do that. This time, he just drove them away. Okay? He said, enough blood has been shed today. He didn't say that either, but it just sounded cooler. Oops, sorry. And when the daughters came back to their father, he asked, how did you guys come back so early? And they said, an Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds and even drew water for us and watered the flock. Very interesting, an Egyptian. That shows us that Moses, rejected by the Hebrews and rejected by the Egyptians, though he looked like an Egyptian, maybe the way he dressed or his style about him, that he was an Egyptian. But he was rejected by both. He had no home. And Ruel said, then where is he? Why have you left this man? Call him that he may eat. Invite him over for dinner. Not only that, he gave Moses his daughter, Zipporah, to marry. And she gave birth to a son, and they called him Gershom. And he said, I have been a sojourner in this foreign land. And they lived happily ever after. I love that story about Moses. No, they actually did not. You see, Moses is not living out really God's calling for him. Not yet. Okay? He thinks that he's going to retire here. He thinks he's going to live, going to settle down and everything. You know, he grew up, I'm sure that he grew up with a lot of conflict. Like, I'm a Hebrew, I'm living with the Egyptians, nobody loves me. And then finally, these people love him and they draw him in. But what we're going to realize as we move on in the book of Exodus is that Moses actually has a higher calling, and that desire to bring justice for the Hebrews, God's going to call him back to that and do it the right way and draw them out. Ironically, so much more blood is actually going to be shed, but it's going to be by the hand of God. And we'll just keep moving here. When we look at what happened here, we realize, number one, ignorance is not bliss. The truth can either set you free or enslave you. Truth drives us to action. Our actions have consequences, and God is preparing us. Wait, before we go to the end. The real question for you guys is this. Who are you? For Moses, he didn't know who he was. He's like, I'm an Egyptian. I'm not an Egyptian. I'm technically a Hebrew. But what he's going to learn later on is that he is a child, number one, a child of God. God is going to call him by name. He's going to interrupt his happily ever after to go do something great and courageous for him. And here's the problem, is that once we hear the truth and we understand who God is in our lives, to walk away, I really believe there's going to be that nagging inside of us saying, you were made for so much more. You were made to be so much greater. Not for ourselves. Everything that we do is for the glory of God. And I never want us to get that mixed up. I never want to teach a message that says God wants you to be great for yourself. He wants you to glorify and to lift up the name of God. But He wants to use us to do that. And I think a lot of times we downplay how we can do that. God has given each of us different talents and abilities. Some of you guys have natural talents. Some of you guys are musical or have some other skill. But then God also gives us gifts. And some of us are really good at communicating with other people, or we're really good at being generous or praying for other people. And I want you to really start to learn, who am I? Who am I in God? And are we going to break into small groups, or we are? Okay, great. And so this is what I want us to do in small groups. I want us to go into the book of Ephesians, and I want us to look at Ephesians chapter 1. And in Ephesians chapter 1, you're going to see what God says a person who is following Him has, how he's blessed, how he should live, all these different things. Then I want you to start saying to yourself, I am, and start repeating those blessings. Like, I was chosen before the foundation of the world. I am called to be holy. And these different things. And I want us to start to really think about who we are in God's eyes, not who we are by the things that we're good at. All right? And I don't know what God has in store for you in your lives, but what I do know is this, that if you are truly drawing close to Him, reading the Bible, praying, just trying to draw close to Him in every way, He'll start to reveal those things. And just like Moses, He'll start putting those burdens on your heart to say, this is how God wants me to serve Him. All right? So let me just real quick pray, and then we can break out. Lord, we thank you that you are so faithful to us. We thank you that you give us each a purpose. And Lord, we don't define who we are. Lord, you define that for us. I know, like Moses, some of us will fall off track a little bit and maybe kind of lose our way. Lord, but we know that just like in Moses' life, as we'll learn later, you are faithful to us. And we thank you for that. Show us, Lord, what you have in store for us in your name. Amen.
So normally small groups, we split up by the gender, so it's like males on this side, females on this side. Yeah. So you guys can, males can have on this side, females. Yeah. And then you want to leave the all night. Leave that.
Guys, that like hit my like